Before we start, a lot of people message me asking me about the filters over some of the footage in my Floyd video. I only used it and still use it to avoid any copyright issues, and that's why it is included, but apologies if you're not a big fan of it. Again, it's only just because of copyright. Now, recently, a very popular and heated discussion has arisen between Terence Crawford and Floyd Mayweather, who was better, who would win at each respective division, etc, etc. Now, I'm only going to be focusing on the pound for pound or all-time discussions in this video. In the next video, or the part 2 of this video, I am going to be making a head-to-head scenario between the 4 divisions they shared, talking about who wins between those 4 divisions. But to not overcomplicate this video, we're only going to be talking about the pound for pound or all-time, who is better between those two. And before we even start, I am just going to say I cannot win here. If I say the Floyd fans win, Crawford fans will be morbidly angry. If I say Crawford wins, the Floyd fans are going to be insanely mad, meaning I'm only making this video for the small percentage of people that actually want to have a dialogue and come here for the reasons as to why I think one is better than the other. Now, to establish who is even better to begin with, we first have to establish a criteria. The only 2 meaningful aspects when it comes to this are who you beat and how you beat them. Things like achievements do not matter, which I will occasionally see a Crawford fan argue that Crawford is better than Mayweather because of achievements, but to be honest, it is mostly Mayweather fans I've seen argue this. And no, achievements do not matter. This is because not all achievements are equal, and that is because who you beat to get that championship is not equal. Case in point, Naoya Inoue defeating Nonito Donaire to unify the titles is a lot more impressive than, say, Haney defeating Kambosos. The achievements do not make the fighters make the achievements, and that's how it's always been and will continue to be. Even if we want to go down the road of achievements, Crawford is winning in this regard. He's an 18-time champion both holistically and uniquely. Holistically, Floyd is a 15-time champion, and when it comes to unique titles, he's 11-time champion. Crawford was undisputed 3 times in 3 divisions, Floyd was never, and both are 5-division champions. Meaning, even if we go down this road, Crawford would still be winning. But like I said earlier, it's a matter of who you defeat and how well you did. Because of this, we are going to be going over each person's opposition and going over their best wins and seeing who has the best wins. I'll also be going over some popular names from both sides that people bring up and act like standout, when to be honest, they are not of that level. Starting with Mayweather, I would say Floyd's first elite win came against Genaro Hernandez, who was an amazing champion, defeating everyone, even some big names like Carlos Hernandez and Azuma Nelson. Only lost to De La Hoya when he moved up to 135, a really great win on Floyd's resume, to be honest. I think maybe the best win in Floyd's career is his win against Corrales. Corrales, who was exceptional at 130, was undefeated, and would go on to defeat Casamayor, Castillo, and Fredes, a certified legend and an amazing fighter both before and after Floyd. Now, the next person people would throw into this tier is Jose Luis Castillo. I did have Floyd losing the first fight, as did many, so I don't count this as an elite win for Floyd. Now, a lot of people are then going to say, well, what about the second fight with Castillo? While I do agree this should count as an elite level win, on the surface, it doesn't in hindsight. Castillo had faced tendinitis and had a much shorter camp, as he suggested after the fight he wasn't properly developed for the fight, so I wouldn't count this for Floyd either, to be honest, just because of the conditions. But I do think if this was, say, a repeat of the first fight, I would have said this is an elite level win for Floyd. People are going to mention Arturo Gatti as this big time elite level win. A great showing for Mayweather, but by this point in Gatti's career, he had slowed down quite a bit. He had changed his style as well after the Ward trilogy, with this fight taking place quite a bit afterwards. Gatti was only the champion because Tszyu was wrongfully stripped of the WBC. Floyd would also note Gatti is a paper champion. Because of this, I don't consider this an elite level win for Floyd. People will also mention Zab Judah. Zab Judah was never really an elite level fighter. I think he was pretty solid, but he was never that great. Lost to Tszyu pretty horribly in 2 rounds, and then moves up to 147 to have mixed success, then losing to Boldemir right before Floyd. Nothing really suggests that Judah was an elite 147 fighter around this time period, to be honest, other than that he looked fast and looked cool, I guess. Now, on the contrast, a big time win for Floyd, as I see it, is his fight against De La Hoya, a very dominant performance after the dust rustled initially. Now, a lot of people will immediately say De La Hoya wasn't far removed from his big time losing streak. De La Hoya was also older and mentally very questionable at this point in his life as well, but De La Hoya at 154 was pretty good at the weight, defeating Vargas and should have defeated Mosley in their second fight. Floyd also was moving up after a brief run at 147. I get this wasn't a prime De La Hoya, but this was still a pretty good De La Hoya, so I would count this as an elite level win for Floyd. Now, Floyd decides to face Ricky Hatton at 147. A lot of people are going to say this is a big time win for Floyd, but in hindsight, it really isn't. Hatton didn't really have the greatest career as he dominated a lot of older lightweights, moving up to 140, and then he gets the big victory over Costa Tszyu. Floyd doesn't even fight Hatton at 140, he fights Hatton at 147, which is even less impressive than on paper. A lot of people will mention that Hatton won a title at 147 a year before the fight against Floyd, but who Hatton won it against was a mixed success level contender who was only champion because this division was very weak at the time. It also wasn't even the major WBA title, or the WBA super title as it would be known as. It was just the regular title, which is effectively the WBA's interim belt. So no, Floyd defeating this guy with very little experience, only defeating this mixed success contender a year prior, with Hatton himself not even being the craziest, isn't that impressive. What also isn't very impressive, and following similar circumstances, is Floyd's win over Juan Manuel Marquez. In case you're unaware, Marquez in 2008 has his second fight with Manny Pacquiao at 130. He then moves up to face an older Casamayor at 135, and then faces Juan Diaz not long afterwards at 135. In 2009, when he fought Floyd, it was at a catchweight of 144, or essentially welterweight for that matter, meaning Marquez effectively moved up 3 divisions in the span of a year and fought Floyd. All the while, Floyd didn't even make weight. So I would seriously hope Floyd would win a fight where a guy is coming up 3 divisions, not to mention the fact that Marquez isn't particularly a big guy nor a fast guy, so I don't find this a very impressive win, and by no means is an elite level win for Floyd. The next fighter people will mention is Shane Mosley. Mosley at his prime would 100% be an elite level win, but seeing this was almost 10 years past his best for Shane, several years after the Forrest bout, which would change how Shane would fight forever, it's also worth mentioning Mosley would have very mixed success at 147 as soon as the division started to become more competitive, losing to Forrest, Cotto, Floyd, and Pacquiao, really only looking good against the one Margarito fight, where even then some people question how good Margarito truly is because of the controversies. This was not at all a prime level Shane, however, especially when factoring the age being almost 40 years old, which I know Floyd was also getting up there in age, but unlike Floyd, Shane's style was entirely predicated on his speed. So I would say this was a good win for Floyd, but not an elite level win. On the contrary, I do think Cotto is an elite level win. Sure, Cotto was not particularly a huge guy at 154, but he was the rightful champ at the weight and looked pretty good. Floyd moved up in weight as well. For me, this makes a simple decision that this was a great win for Floyd. Another very simple one is Floyd's win over Canelo, an amazing win, maybe Floyd's best. The only thing that could hold it back is that Canelo would improve as a fighter later on, but unlike many people that say Canelo was too young, Canelo was the rightful champion and was on a hot streak of wins at this time. Even at that age, he was really good, so this doesn't take away from Floyd whatsoever, and seeing that Floyd essentially moved up as 154 is not Floyd's natural weight class, this is an amazing level win for Floyd. Now this last one is going to be one of the more controversial decisions, with me referring to the mega bout of Pacquiao versus Mayweather. A lot of people say Pacquiao is very old and well past his best, therefore this win shouldn't count for much. Others say both fighters were older and past their best, so the situation was equal for both. For me, I fall somewhere in the middle. Similar to the Shane situation, Floyd's game was not as reliant on speed as many other fighters he was fighting. This would include Pacquiao, but I do think due to what Pacquiao would go on to demonstrate, Pacquiao was still very good. Floyd was older, so it's not like he was necessarily in peak form either, so I would still define this as an elite win, even if Pacquiao was further removed from his best days. So after totaling everything, Floyd has 6 elite level wins throughout his career. A lot of the Floyd standum have each person I named as this elite level win, but the arguments for that tend to be very faulty and not good, to be honest. A lot of the Floyd detractors are going to account for even less than I did and act like Floyd only has 1 to 2 good wins in his career. I just think this is different levels of ignorance from both sides. Which this is a pretty solid resume for Floyd, which a lot of people cannot say they have 6 elite level wins on this level when it comes to their resume in boxing history. Now we'll see if Crawford has anything similar in his career. which the first big win for Crawford came when he thoroughly beat Gamboa. Gamboa, who was one of the best fighters in the world at the time, being on the pound for pound list, was undefeated, had 2 victories at 130 before moving up to 135 to get the interim belt at 135, and then facing Crawford in an attempt to take his title. Gamboa was the favorite going into this fight because he was undefeated and was a menace. Crawford, after some challenges in the fight, ended things in the 9th round very dominantly. This is a big time victory for Crawford, an excellent win, definitely an elite level win. Now after this, I think Crawford just goes on a dry spell of facing at best solid opposition, but nothing great. A lot of people will point to Victor Postal and say he was an elite level fighter. Postal was 28-0 heading into the Crawford fight, defeating guys like Hank Lundy and Lucas Matisse, but I don't think I would necessarily call Postal elite. Some solid wins and he himself seemed pretty good, but nothing in his career would elevate him to that tier. So a good win for Crawford, but not yet of that level. The same I would apply to Amir Khan. Now Khan at his best at 140 and lower, I could make a good argument for him being elite, where he was going on stretches of victories against some real solid guys, but at 147 he wasn't quite the same. He was still good as his 140 counterpart and lower, but he wasn't exactly the same as he was at 147 and especially even higher at 160. At this point as well, Khan had lost some steam after moving to middleweight and losing to Canelo. Again, good win for Crawford, especially because Crawford thoroughly outclassed Khan in a very dominant performance, but this wouldn't be a elite level win for him. Following Khan a year later, Crawford would face Kell Brook. Kell Brook is very underrated in my opinion, only losing to the very best at 147. Outclassing and destroying everyone else, even giving Porter one of his most decisive losses, which is very rare in Porter's resume. Now, people will act like Brook was completely washed after Triple G, and I heavily disagree with this. Post Spence, he went back to his ways, destroying ranked opposition, showing he was neither washed and really only struggled when it came to recklessly moving up to 160. Crawford, after Brook got back on his little winning streak, absolutely destroyed Brook. While a bit past his best, I still think Brook was an elite level fighter at this time. In Crawford's very next fight, he would face Shawn Porter. Shawn Porter is absolutely an elite level win. Porter often gets underrated, and I'm not sure how, because Porter, when he first won the title, greatly beat out Alexander. Alexander, who at this point had great wins over DeMarcus Corley, Marcos Maidana, and Lucas Matisse. Porter decisively beat out Alexander, then destroying Paulie Malignaggi, lost a tough contest against Kell Brook, later destroying Adrian Broner. This was Broner pre-Mikey Garcia, so this was still Broner towards the height of his game. Should have beaten Keith Thurman in a controversial loss, defeating Danny Garcia for the WBC title, and then defeating the eventual champion Yordenis Ugas. Even afterwards giving Errol Spence one of the toughest fights in his career, his toughest victory to date as a matter of fact. Porter was absolutely amazing, and after some closer rounds against Crawford, Crawford displayed an extra level in being the only person to stop Porter. Occasionally I'll hear that Porter was washed or was old, but Porter up to this point had shown zero signs of slowing down. He even said in interviews that he was in the best shape of his career. When deciding how great a fighter is, we just don't arbitrarily say a fighter is washed or isn't good, which is relevant to this video because people will apply this to both sides of Crawford and Floyd. If a fighter has shown little to no decline, there is no reason to assume they have up to that point, and this goes for Shawn Porter, who did not demonstrate that prior to the Crawford fight, which does make this an elite level win for Bud. After this, Bud takes his toughest challenge to date against Errol Spence. Errol Spence, ever since 2017, have been on a very great run, one of the best in modern times to be honest, defeating Kell Brook, Lamont Peterson, Mikey Garcia, Shawn Porter, and Yordenis Ugas, becoming unified champ, where Spence was regarded as one of the very best fighters in the world, some even ranking him as pound for pound #1, and Crawford would put on one of the most dominant performances we've ever seen in the sport, being the only person to not only win against Spence, but stop him as well. Now, the immediate criticism people are going to throw out is the car crash and acting like Spence was washed, but this is honestly pure copium. Before the Crawford fight, Spence thoroughly outclassed Danny Garcia, and after that put on one of his best performances against Yordenis Ugas. He showed no signs of slowing down, so this criticism is not valid when trying to downplay the victory, making this honestly one of the best victories in welterweight history. After this, Crawford moves up to 154 and faces Israil Madrimov. Madrimov, I do think, gets harshly criticized because of his smaller amounts of professional professional fights. However, Madrimov is one of the best amateurs in recent times, where professionally he destroyed Michael Soro for the first time and destroyed Kurbanov in only a few rounds. After the Bud fight, he proceeds to give Virgil Ortiz a very challenging fight, which for some reason people hold against Madrimov and act like Virgil Ortiz isn't one of the best boxers in the world today. But seeing that Crawford did move up in weight, I would rate this as an elite level win. Madrimov, who is a pretty good fighter and displayed some amazing skills, destroying everyone prior to Crawford and giving arguably the best fighter at 154, the most stacked division in today's game right now, a very tough fight. I do think after some more opportunities, Madrimov will continue to demonstrate his skill level better. Maybe if Crawford wasn't moving up in weight, I wouldn't call this an elite level win, but that is what cements it for me, that Crawford did move up and face Madrimov. And lastly, Crawford's biggest win in his career, moving up 3 divisions and defeating the undisputed champion and one of the best fighters at 168 ever in Canelo Alvarez. Never before seen territory, and Crawford easily dispatched Canelo. The only real way to downplay this victory is by saying this wasn't peak Canelo as he was older, but on the flip side, Crawford is also older and this was not peak Crawford either, meaning this doesn't take away from the win whatsoever. Now, before I even give my final verdict, I'm going to go over the elephant in the room that I know I will see in the comments, even after I address it here. But no matter what I say, people for and against both sides are going to downplay all of these elite wins. An example, Floyd fought a mentally unstable and druggie who was 34 years old coming off of a losing streak. How is that an impressive or an elite level win? Or Crawford beat up a car accident victim with a damaged eye who wasn't even close to his best days. Examples like these are going to flood the comments no matter who you say is better. For every fighter you want to downplay Crawford with, you can do the same with Floyd and vice versa. Neither are exclusive to either fighter, and if you're someone watching this trying to actually dissect who has the better resume, I would say ignore these people in the comments. Now, as for who I think is better, after thinking about it a bit, I do think it is reasonably close when talking about elite wins, but as of right now, with my current perspective on both fighters, I give the slight edge to Floyd. My reasoning being, I think Floyd's best wins are not as good as Crawford's best wins. For example, beating Spence is a better win than Corrales, and given the circumstances, I find Bud's win over Canelo more impressive than Floyd's. But on the other side of this coin, I think Bud's wins over Brook and Madrimov are on the lower end of the elite territory, and I think Floyd's worst wins I've mentioned are much better victories. Floyd's elite level opposition was much more consistent, and I do think is overall greater, at least as of right now. However, when we start introducing the idea of potentially a Janibek fight or an Landy Lara fight with both of them, with both him and Bud being at older ages, when we start introducing these fights into the equation and assuming Crawford performs amazing in those fights as well, that's when I would give Crawford the pretty clear edge, to be honest, as it would be rather difficult to argue Floyd is better at that point with those elite level wins also added to Crawford's resume. But those fights, assuming they even happen, haven't happened yet, so I'm obviously not including them in Crawford's resume. Overall, I do think Floyd currently has the better resume. I do think Crawford has the potential to surpass it. Who knows, maybe he moves up to 175 and absolutely nukes this conversation sometime next year. We'll see. But anyways guys, thank you all for watching, and stay tuned for part 2 where I go over how Bud and Floyd do in their head-to-head scenario. But other than that guys, till next time.